clamp down. Now, meet the brains also behind the world's first effective coronavirus vaccine. That is a very big story that has been making headlines this week, and of course we shall be looking deeper into that, and of course perhaps the medical experts that shall be joining us later on shall tell us what they think about the possibility of a vaccine coming to us. Now let's move closer to home. There have been lots of reactions to the BBI report since it was launched. Only yesterday, governors presented their views, proposing a number of changes, including transfer of funds for parastatals to devolved functions to the counties, and that they should not be forced to appoint women as running mates. Various groups continue to present their views. However, ODM leader Raila Odinga says there is little likelihood that new ideas will be introduced to the report. And this morning, we seek your views on the issue, and we ask you, should the BBI report be amended? Get on Twitter, tell us what you think. I'm at Trix Ingado, and the hashtag to use is KTN Morning Express. And predictably, this issue is the biggest story today in the Standard. And joining me to analyze that story and many others that are making headlines locally is Honorable Sakwa Bunyasi, Member of Parliament for Nambale, who is a regular on the show and shall be helping us delve deeper into this particular issue. Now, I'll pose this same question to you, Honorable Bunyasi. Should the BBI report be amended to accommodate these views?
Thank you very much, Trix, and that's a very interesting question. Certainly, for an issue that is important as the BBI report that is going to overhaul the Constitution, we're just doing amendments, we'll get a virtually new Constitution at the end of it. It must allow ideas to come in. People are sharpening the ideas. Constituencies, in terms of policy constituencies, are coming forward to say what really is of interest to them now that there is the specific wording. And I'm sure that in respect of changes such as those proposed by counties, they will be accommodated.
Yes.
My analysis, my thinking is this. They will know that if they don't do that, they can fail to get the number that they want. Of course, they can bulldoze some here, perhaps, and get it 24. But you cannot afford to annoy constituencies before the election. I'm confident that although they will not announce publicly that it's acceptable, they'll have to accept some of it. The suggestions being made by counties serve them well, but they are very specific to their interests. And many interest groups are going to come in with those kinds of suggestions. That's why constitutions are a negotiated outcome.
Right. Now, there are various elements that have come out. Those have been outlined by the Standard on the front page. The first one, I'd like us to break them all down. All monies held by parastatals that perform devolved functions to be transferred to counties. What do you think is the reasoning behind this, and what change would that bring if it is accommodated? That is actually doing a cleanup, because when they did the transfer of the developed functions back in 2015, it was expected that in respect of the function that were going to go to counties, the devolution would be done completely. But there are a number of areas in which the national government held, particularly, for example, in health, but there are also areas in, say, parastatals that do agricultural duties, and agriculture has been devolved to a large extent, or parastatals that are in water, and water has been devolved. Right.
So one of the things that I'm looking for is to clean up that incomplete transfer, both of functions and of resources that go with it.
Now, what about the IBC functions being devolved? This is another issue that has come up, and they want elections to be managed at the county level.
I think we are copying our big brothers that we have, where we got our constitutional ideas from. Yes. Like in the U.S., and since the U.S. has been very much in the news, in the U.S., the elections are managed at the state level, with some function actually developed below their state level agencies to counties. Counties for them are the sub-state institutions, and the state is the sub-federal institution. Right. That's where each state manages elections. It has got its own election commissioner, which is generally Attorney General of the Secretary of State of the particular state. So I think people are getting those ideas. We are the equivalent of states in the U.S. in terms of just being the next layer from the national one. Right. And the suggestion is let this be managed in every county. Attractive idea. I don't know if we have the capacity to handle it, but it may be an idea that will not go away quickly. It's probably going to stay with us, people wanting to get that localized rather than having an IBC only in Nairobi that has great difficulty managing far-off areas from Nairobi.
Okay, but in the United States, you see they have some more trust in their systems and they have been established for much longer. There's a sense of maturity politically and in terms of how they run their elections. Do you think we are at that capacity and to the point that we can actually devolve those functions?
I think that if we fought impunity, we have the technical capacity. Our education levels are very good, exposure is good.
Right.
And there'll be teething problems as they grow. And I'm sure the U.S. went through this. Of course, one big difference between us and the U.S. is that in the U.S., they came from those lower levels, from those counties who agreed to merge into a state, which then agreed to federate.
Yes.
Now we're coming from a national government that is lending, that is reluctantly seizing powers down. So it's a bit different. The friction levels are different. Yes, I think there may be some teething problems in the beginning. It may vary from area to area. But if we had the patience to clean it up progressively, it will probably not take many elections, and it will be there.
Okay. Now, far from that, there's the issue of the governors saying they do not want to be forced to have a female running mate. Where do you stand on that?
Well, first of all, at a very broad level, if you get a constraint on how you elect your running mate, it sort of creates a bit more difficulty. Generally speaking, whether that running mate is a man or woman.
Yeah.
But now we are into the specificity of with the gender debate that we have got, that it should be a woman. I am of two minds on this.
Yes.
As somebody who has seen what happens around the world, I think it's a good idea. We're after all seeking to get women in more strategic positions in our society, and we'll be a better society when there are more women in strategic positions also, because they see things differently and it's beneficial to the nation. The only challenge is, and I say that being a candidate myself in 2022, you may be eyeing a particular corner of your county, for example, that if I'm from a constituency or sub-county X, then given the geopolitics of the county, then I need a running mate from such and such a sub-county.
Yes.
But in that sub-county, you may not necessarily get the woman who fits the bill, if you're a man, or if you're a woman, the man who fits the bill for what you'd like to do, who has the gravitas that would help with the ticket. So those are just practical considerations, which I'm sure can be overcome. I personally have no opposition in principle to having an opposite gender at the county level. The only thing, Trix, is that if we are going to get our governance structures to work well, then we need symmetry. Symmetry being that what you do for the national government may need to be done for the county government. So if you're saying that the CEO, the chief executive of the county, the two must be of opposite gender, you probably need to say the same thing at the national level.
Right.
If you have a male who is running for president, they must have a woman as the number two. If there are going to be two number twos, then you must have either gender, or rather both genders, not either, both genders as running. It can't be that it's good for the counties, or it must happen at the counties and not at the national level. That would be a bit in a sort of grandfathering, and I don't think we should do it. We should do it that way. And very quickly on this is going to be similar to the way that the benefit structure is being done at national level, say for the parliament, national parliament. You have to mimic similar things to be done at the county level. That's how the U.S. government is structured, where we are copying from. They have Supreme Courts all the way down. They have all the structures at the federal level are also present at the lower structures. So we cannot pretend that the national level is capable of handling X and not Y. Education is the same, for example. You can't say MCA should have degrees when the National Assembly and Parliament have zero requirement. Right now, you can have nursery school education is enough. It doesn't require anything more. That's how they amended the law last time. So if you say degrees for MCS, it must at the minimum apply to national institutions. So this is also similar. I think in principle, I would go myself with this. For me, it would possibly be very constraining, but it's the direction to go in the future.
Okay. Now, I'd like us to backtrack a little bit to the position of woman representative. What do you think, if this is accommodated, what more could be done for that particular position to make it more efficient and, of course, ensure that there's more gender parity at the county level, if this is a rectification that is made to the report?
Yeah, you know, to achieve gender parity as well as any similar big national policy goals, first you need to get the regulations, and the law and regulations are coming in place. For those that want, they are coming in place. These kinds of decisions are some of the decisions that build the institutions, like the institution of governors, the governorate, for example, now would have to be a joint ticket between the genders, with the two genders involved. Over time, this settles in, becomes our political culture, so to say. And two, once you've got both genders, the way they look at issues in decision making is different.
Right.
Gender affects decision making. You can be as trained as you might think, and you think differently as a man, you think differently as a woman, and we need both of those decisions at the table. I got a call yesterday from a constituent that I only know rather vaguely, a woman, and she says, hawatakanyaga sisi watu wa chini. Kwa nini wanataka kufinya wanawake? Mbona watu wengine wanapiga kuwa na wanawake kama running mate? She was very almost angry.
Yes.
So I think the awareness levels are high, and the people who vote a majority of voters in elections. I don't think we can take it for granted this time. I think we need to look at it seriously, and everyone should see that the debate is not trivial. The debate is actually serious, so that our voters, that constituency comes on board. We may be way ahead of other countries, but so should we be if we are ready to be there, and I think we are ready to get there.
Okay, and in countries such as Rwanda, they are leading by example in terms of this gender parity. Now, number 5 to me is quite curious. The governors are suggesting not to be held criminally responsible for loss, wastage of county resources. I mean, how can that be? Because by virtue of you being in charge, you hold responsibility for everything that happens under you. What do you make of this one?
I think there are several aspects to it. Two important aspects to it. There is that if funds are being wasted or lost by virtue of the decision you're making, and if the loss or wastage ends up being of benefit to aspects of the community, to yourself or any other persons there, you're redistributing resources by your action or lack of action. You must be held responsible. If it's through, as it has happened, outright theft, you will not be held for the theft of everybody else, but you must be held responsible as a leader, that probably you should be assisting in recovery of resources or in prosecution and so on. It is true that the governors may not know every corner of what's happening in their county, but I think usually what happens is when you discovered, from the moment you knew or discovered, what action did you take?
Yes.
So you might hold political responsibility to say, yes, I think this is a mistake, this is a matter that we must follow through. I was unaware of this, and you're not going to be taken to jail for being unaware. You'll be taken to jail for benefiting from turning aside. You can turn aside in order to benefit also, you see.
Yes.
So I think they can't quite get away from this. The next thing they will say then is that it should be unprosecutable while they're still governors. You know, the kind of thing we give to heads of state.
Right.
I think if we do that, we will be headed in the wrong direction.
Okay. Now, speaking of taking responsibility, there's a story, and I'm sure you must have seen this video of CS for Education, George Magoha, making its rounds on social media. And this is on the front page of the Daily Nation. Video of Magoha bullying junior sparks outrage. And a lot of people have condemned this situation. It says in part, an outraged Public Teachers Union and Senate have demanded an apology from the CS, with some calling for his resignation or sacking by the president over what they term as blatant arrogance. What do you make of this? And as a leader, I'm sure you have a few things to say about conduct and basic decorum.
Yes, I think this is deplorable, really. Senior people they can be firm, but they must be cordial. They must be. That's how we should deal with each other. The CS education, unfortunately, I think it is this style. In his area of qualification, is a very highly qualified person.
Yes.
But now he's not working in his area of qualification where he can probably intimidate his juniors. He's managing the education sector. And even though he's a vice chancellor of a university, that's quite different from managing from a point of view of a minister or cabinet secretary.
Right.
I think his style has tended to be abrasive. it has started to be actually what arrogant is probably right.
Yeah.
Very forceful. And you can't begin humiliating people in public. People are trying to copy Magufuli. Magufuli's style is a horrible style. It's not a style that could work in many countries. It won't work in this country, for example.
Yes.
So people tend to think that you can call up a junior and now begin lecturing them. Where have you been yourself in following through? And tricks as I conclude.
Yeah.
There was a time when he was going around to check on readiness for Corona, and I said on this show, I said instead of the minister trotting to one or two polytechnics around the country or institutions and coming back to issue instructions, he should be telling us what systems he has got in place to receive information, to evaluate information, not just by himself, by a team that he has got. He has got a big team. And then we want to hear him speak as he is speaking the entire Kenya based on the information he's receiving, not based on the information of his last trip in one corner of the country or another. I think he has to change his style. I think it must be a team effort where he's the head of the team. It cannot be a single one-person show. And nobody is impressed by aggressive styles. Nobody is impressed by your academic qualifications when you stand up to speak. You just have to say the things that relate to your policy area and what the people want to see done and how you're going to handle it. And if you have a difficulty with a particular stuff, call them aside and speak to them, understand where they're coming from. Change them, transfer them, but don't go impressing people by showing your authority. I think that was deplorable. Yes. I agree with the people who are condemning it.
We have here on page 12 more details about that one, and the video clip of Magoha bullying Junior Sparks. Outrage in the recording, the CS calls an official a complete fool in the full glare of cameras and teachers. Now, one Naomi Shionga has said, as the education minister, Professor Magoha should be the last person to set a bad example to our children. You can take a look at the papers and see what more is coming out of that story as it unfolds. Now, there's a positive story still in the education sector here. Peter Tabati, the world's best teacher, has won yet another prize. Honorable Bunyasi, what do you make of that? He is setting quite the good example, if you're looking for example for the children, don't you think?
Yes, it is, and I think as Kenyans we should be very proud of that. That means that we are doing some things right, perhaps many things right. But even if you are doing the right things, people have to step back and appreciate that we are doing the right things. Then it will strengthen our systems and process. I was very happy to see that yet again Kenyan teachers are standing out.
Yes, absolutely. This is the Ahimsa Award by trustees of the Institute of Gynology in London for selfless action and compassion. This is what he has won, yet another international award. Take a look at that and see for yourself what ways this man is making us proud in 2020. Last time he was awarded was in 2019. So it's pretty good news right there. On page 8 of the Standard, you're told 24 more die. Positive cases rise to 64,588. Not very good news right there. WHO says on October that the number of deaths from the coronavirus is an approximation, since it is not easy to know exactly when one was infected. And this study of the WHO further tells us that the hospitals as the main source of data are not integrated into the civil registration system, and many systems are only partially digitized, leading to lag times in reporting. So you can imagine if 64,588 is not the exact number of people who we have registered as positive for coronavirus, then the situation could be much worse. Then on the side there, we're told about police brutality in corona operation drawing the group's ire. We need to strike a balance clearly in terms of reporting, treating people with coronavirus, but at the same time enforcing seems to take an extreme in certain instances. Honorable Nyasi, this overview of the situation in the country, what do you make of it?
Certainly, there is the wave. If it's a new wave, it's stronger than the first one, and I think it's much more widespread. The only consolation is that I get a sense that people are now much more aware that this is real.
Yes.
I think people had been at a level of denial, which is very, very unfortunate. They were listening maybe to the president of the U.S. who had his own views, and that had penetrated a lot. But now I notice, even anecdotally, that ordinary people are getting really concerned about this. That is already, I think that's a very good start in terms of listening in to what it is that they have to do as suggested by the Minister of Health. They may not be perfect. Social distancing sometimes done only about a foot, and they think they're further than they have been before. But I think progressively we will get there. I see churches responding. Funerals had gone back to the bad habits, and I don't think they have come back fully. That needs to be stepped up. Tricks, the numbers are going to be much bigger. And by the time it gets beyond our non-symptomatic condition where we don't know we are sick, to a point where we know we are sick, therefore hospitals become necessary, or maybe home isolation. But hospitalization, for example, if we get there, then we are in a huge trouble. Because the facilities are overwhelmed and they are very limited. So you want us just to pray that it's something you will cope with the home isolation, that you don't get to needing a ventilator or needing an ICU. ICU beds are extremely rare. They are as they were before. Maybe there have been only a marginal increase. So that's a real problem. Then, in addition to that, Tricks, a very quick one, the police brutality. I think the enforcement needs to be firm, but brutality should be zero. Police have this tendency to think that if you slap somebody, if you kick somebody, if you break down somebody's door, and in my constituency, they broke in somebody's compound and injured people, literally, I mean, broke bones and so on, absolutely unnecessary. So that the problems out of corona enforcement by police are worse than the corona itself and so on. I think the police must take brutality out of what they do. We are not doing enough in that scope.
And still in relation to that, there's another story here on page 12 that tells us that COVID-19 offences higher than other crimes in March. But far from that, graft is still making headlines. Right now, we're told 7 CSs and 11 governors among big fish in Haji's net. So far, 20 cases, 20 is the number of cases concluded during the COVID-19 period out of 26 that were filed. Briefly, what do you make of the fight against graft?
I have a feeling that we have a disconnect between the Office of the Criminal Investigations, who are the ones that will collect evidence, the kind of court-level evidence, and the DPP, and of course the ACC. The agencies are not working in unison. It's almost as if they're tasked to do what they please to do. I'm sure there is a level of convergence. It's just that convergence among them doesn't seem to be adequate. Indeed, yes. We have heard about a number of governors and CSs for more than a year now. And it's almost mentioned as if it's a threat. And my question is, if you're holding on to this, what are you waiting for? You've discovered it and you're not moving forward with it. It seems to come out like we have this, as if to threaten those others out there. That, I think, for me, that's a degree of inadequacy. Probably they aren't ready, so they shouldn't be announcing who they have got, or rather they have got X number. If you have got them, if you want to give us data, give us the full range of the data along the chain as it is. So, but it's good news, though, that they will at last nab some of them, if they ever get there. Going into BBI and this attempt to seek support from different corners is going to compromise these efforts, especially given the fact that the Office of the DPP doesn't seem to act as independently as it should.
Okay, now take a look at page 12 of the Standard this morning to learn more about that developing story. But far from that, thank you very much, Honourable